Good day, students. Today's lecture we are going to look at managing purchasing and supply relations. In our first learning outcome, we want to look at the definition of relationships in the context of supply, the purchase and supply relationship spectrum, and benefits of supplier relationships. Let's first define supplier relationships. Supplier relationship management, abbreviation SRM, is the discipline of strategically planning, managing all interactions with third-party organizations that supply goods or services to an organization in order to maximize the value of those interactions. In practice, supplier relationship management entails creating closer, more collaborative relationships with key suppliers in order to uncover and realize new value and reduce risk and failure. Let's look at the supplier relationship spectrum. Here we are looking at the different types of supplier relationships which can exist. Supplier relationships can stretch from a competitive relationship to a more collaborative relationship. A competitive relationship, this is whereby the supplier and the buyer are competing. Either party is seeking to make an advantage. Like this is a relationship which is sometimes known as the adversarial relationship, or I can say arm's length relationship. Arm's length relationship, there is no relationship at all. Each party is avoiding the other. What they want is benefits. Right, from this type of a relationship, we move on to a transactional relationship. This relationship is based on transaction. There is no closer relationship between the buyer and the supplier. But what they only do is to make a transaction, and that will be the end of the business. Right? Then the other type of a relationship is a closer tactical relationship. In this relationship, the buyer or the supplier is seeking to have a closer relationship with each other. They try to understand each other, what they buy, how they buy, when they buy. They give each other preferential terms. Then the other one is the single sourced. Single sourced, there is trust. The buyer is relying on one supplier. Whenever the buyer is running short of the product, the buyer will think of one supplier who is responsible for supplying the product. The other type of relationship is outsourcing. Here the relationship is improved. Outsourcing, this is whereby the buyer, or maybe to be more precise, this is whereby one company contracts another company to manufacture a product or part of the product. That is outsourcing. A typical example here we can have, for example, let's say, for example, a car manufacturer gives a contract to a tire manufacturer to manufacture tires which will be fitted on the car. Right? Then the next level of relationship is a strategic alliance. On a strategic alliance, here the buyer and the supplier establishes a strategic relationship where they manufacture products together. Sometimes they can carry on research and development together. They can do some researches together. That is a strategic alliance. Then partnership. Partnership, this one, this is whereby the buyer and the supplier come together. It's more of an integration. Like, say, for example, a supplier of a product buys some of the organizations which buy the product. That's a partnership. Co-desting, that is an extreme case of a relationship where the two becomes together, is more than a partnership. Here they are operating like one. Now let's look at the benefits of supplier relationships. One, it leads to reduced costs, increased efficiency, minimized price fluctuations, can lead to outsourcing of other activities. Let's move on to learning outcome 2. Learning outcome 2, we are looking at supplier positioning models, benefits of supplier positioning, the reasons for changing the way in which a relationship operates. Supplier positioning model. Supplier positioning is the process of classifying suppliers in terms of the profit potential and supplier risk. This can be summarized using a diagram. On the diagram, there are two variables then. We have got relative costs and composite risk. If we take the cell, the cell on the up cell on the right, there the the relative risk is low. Relative cost is low, composite risk is high. So here it's specialized procurement. We go to the lower cell there, relative costs is low, composite risk is also low. That one is routine procurement, minimize effort. Then we go to the bottom cell on the right, relative cost is high, composite risk is low, procurement is volume. Then the last cell on the right, the upper cell on the right, the relative cost is high, composite risk is also high. This one is a critical procurement. Now let's look at the benefits of supplier positioning exercise. A supplier positioning exercise can make you better understand the importance of items to be bought. It leads to better understanding of required relationship strategies. It also leads to better understanding of stock requirements. Let's move on to learning outcome 3. Learning outcome 3, we are looking at the stages of the relationship life cycle. The learning outcomes here, we want to understand all the stages of the relationship life cycle. The first stage is the initiation stage or the initiation phase. On the initiation phase, the following activities will happen. Seller develops an offering. Seller there to be found. Buyer is need. Seller creates need. Buyer specifies. Conditioning by seller. Seller sells. Buyer searches. Conditioning by buyer. Then we move on to phase 2 or stage number 2. This is the agreement stage or agreement phase. The buyer makes an inquiry. Seller gives a quotation. The two negotiate a headline agreement, detailed agreement, and then implementation. And the last phase is the delivery phase. On the delivery phase, we've got the initial delivery, then refining, ongoing delivery, continuous improvement, business development, extension, completion, latent termination, and then final termination. There are so many reasons why a relationship can be terminated in supply chain. A relationship can be terminated maybe because the business has changed and has changed the type of materials which it's using. It can be terminated because of new technology, new products coming in, and maybe legislation which can bring in new products and which can also lead to a ban of other products. Let's move on to learning outcome 4. Learning outcome 4, we are going to look at lean and agile supply philosophies or supplier relationships. We have got two main learning outcomes. We want to look at lean supply philosophy and agile supply philosophy. Let's first look at the lean supply philosophy. Lean supply or lean production, often simply lean, is a systematic method of waste minimization within a manufacturing system without sacrificing productivity. Let's look at the characteristics of lean supply. 1. Focus on perfect, first time quality, zero defects. 2. Waste minimization by avoiding unnecessary movement, unnecessary mistakes, duplication. 3. Focus on continuous improvement by minimizing variability. 4. Typically relies on short production plans. 5. Lean supply is best applied to standardized, price-sensitive products with stable demand and long life cycles. Agile supply. Agility is proficiency at dealing adequately with changes or unexpected events, such as recovering from a situation where a supplier has failed. Then the characteristics of agile supply: 1. Customer focused. 2. Information sharing. 3. Quick response to market changes. Let's move on to learning outcome 5. Learning outcome 5, we are going to look at corporate social responsibility, CSR, and ethical, technological, legal, and environmental constraints on relationship development. We want to cover two main outcomes: definition of corporate social responsibility, and we also want to look at areas of corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility is a very broad concept. To others, it means giving back to the society, while to others, it means being responsible to the effects of a business operations to the environment. In purchasing and supply relations, the main idea is a company should buy from a supplier who has corporate social responsibility. Areas of social responsibility in supply chains. We've got 1. Organizational practices. On organizational practices, we are looking at company policy on corporate social responsibility. Human Resources Department should adopt a clear-cut policy on corporate social responsibility. Then another area is ethical practices. Something which is ethical is something which is considered to be acceptable by the society as good. Right? Ethical issues in supply chain can include things like not accepting gifts, free services from suppliers. Gifts, free services, this can influence the decision of the supplier or the decision of the buyer. Then another area where corporate social responsibility is important is on environmental practices. Right here we are looking at how an organization can protect and conserve its environment. It includes things like recycling and also reducing waste. Then the fourth area is practice of human rights and working conditions, making sure that the working conditions are conducive, working hours are appropriate, all labor laws are being put in practice, the employees are entitled to leave days, women are entitled to maternity leave and other necessary working conditions. Then the next area is practices of occupational health and safety. This area, it ensures that the working environment is safe. Employees are safe from physical hazards. Then the last one is practice to establish relationship with the society. This one, examples include giving back to the society, maybe by introducing projects such as building schools in the society, construction of roads, building of clinics. There are so many social responsibilities to the society. Let's move to learning outcome 6. Learning outcome 6, we are going to analyze the role of reciprocal trading in purchasing relationships. Our main objectives is to define reciprocal trading and also to identify problems of reciprocal trading. Reciprocal trading is when a buyer and seller have an interchangeable relation. That is, the buyer for one transaction becomes the seller with another transaction with the same counterpart. A buyer and seller involved here can be of any order: 2 small-scale shops, 2 firms, or even 2 nationals. Such a trading can happen when each party has something of value to offer to the other party. Now let's look at problems of reciprocal buying. 1. Brings into the buying decision factors that have nothing to do with buyer's principal duty, which is to secure the best possible value for his organization. 2. Unsustainable purchase decisions are made, which could result in a heavy price to pay in terms of product quality and customer satisfaction. It can also lead to possible breach of the law. Let's move on to learning outcome 7. Here we are going to discuss about outsourcing and subcontracting. Main objectives is we are going to define outsourcing, we look at benefits of outsourcing, and we also look at the problems associated with outsourcing. Outsourced manufacturing or contract manufacturing is the outsourcing of parts of the manufacturing process of a product to a third party. More specifically, contract manufacturing is an outsourcing of certain production activities that were previously performed by the manufacturer to a third party. Benefits of outsourcing: improved focus on highest priorities, fixed cost can become semi-fixed and variable, support rapid expansion. Problems of outsourcing: loss of control of product quality and service, higher total costs despite low cost production. Let's move on to learning outcome 8. This is the final learning outcome. In this learning outcome, we are going to look at the causes of conflict in supplier relationships. These are some of the causes of conflict in supplier relationships. 1. Overpricing. If the buyer feels that the supplier is charging a very high price, the relationship can turn bad. Late delivery. Late delivery can disrupt operations. If the supplier is not delivering the product on time, this can also lead to poor relationships between the supplier and the buyer, poor quality. Obviously, poor quality product can lead to poor relationships. Poor communication. Poor communication can spoil the relationship between the supplier and the buyer. The supplier and the buyer, they need to establish clear and effective communication channels so that they will be able to understand each other. Damaged products or faulty products can also lead to poor relationships. Late payment of invoices can also lead to poor relationships between the buyer and the supplier. Thank you very much for listening.